Alrighty, hello and welcome to the CREEDCAST. Thank you for listening as always. We appreciate the fan that consistently hooks in and listens, downloads, gives us all the endorphins that come with seeing that people actually listen to it. Tell your friends and fam about it, rate it and review, all that lovely shit. That's really me just padding to avoid getting to the unfortunate part of this podcast while we're here is to review Port Adelaide. Lost, unfortunately, a very rough game to dive into here as your Port Adelaide Footy Club went down with a score of 12-9-81. Not nearly close enough to Collingwood with their scarily inaccurate, and it could have been worse, score of 17 goals, 21-123. After a promising start that had us all pretty damn happy about 5 minutes into the second quarter, it all went to shit after that. In brutal fashion, as Collingwood kicked 15 of the rest of the 19 goals, I believe it was, to win by 42 points. A result so terrible that a baby started crying at a Archbarker show and caused a shitstorm in Australia over the last 24 hours. Apparently, that's the story I heard. I assume it was the baby was just so upset with this result. And I won't hear anything otherwise. Fucking hell. Jamie, my co-host, help me out here. What the fuck happened? How are you?
Fucking hell is a pretty good expression to use.
Mhm.
Hello, Dave, and hello, everyone. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, this is
in
therapy
this
now.
second edition of Heartbreak Podcast.
Mhm.
Yeah, look, we were just talking off air, and I just told you that I watched the
Mhm.
first three quarters again, and I still don't fucking know what happened, to be honest.
Yeah.
To put it simply, I mean, everyone kind of knows, but
Mhm.
yeah, watching it unfold again was just really quite mind-boggling, especially after the first quarter, which is getting spoken about a lot, of course, because yeah, and end of the first quarter, or like three quarters of the way through the first quarter, and then the challenge, and then the start of the second where we put a couple back on them, and I was in my living room just punching air, like
Mhm.
throwing Hungry Jacks all over the room, and thinking that like life couldn't get much better. And then unfortunately we went to water. Collingwood lifted,
Mhm.
and lifted quite considerably, and we went the opposite way, which
Yeah.
unfortunately is a fairly stereotypical and predictable. That was the thing at the end of it, was that someone posted on social media that something to the effect of like the funny thing or the interesting thing is that not many people are surprised, which
Yes.
is
I vaguely remember
like
seeing probably the same tweet. Yeah.
it just sucks. Like while it was unfolding, I'm just sitting. I was home alone, which is dangerous because my emotions just unfurled,
Mhm. It's sometimes
like
like
it's nobody's business.
when you don't have someone to like that can either keep you on an even keel or whatever, it's gets worse. Sometimes you're just sitting there stewing in your own your own like unbridled like anger and it's because you I think most of us, like you and I particularly, and a lot of people out there, we know that it's just sport. So we know in ourselves, like it's stupid to get so angry about it, but then it is
Ridiculous,
what we
yeah.
care about. So we are going to get angry about it, and we are going to be, you know, kind of unbridled in it, and for that, particularly for that, immediate within the game, and then the immediate aftermath. Yeah, I get that for sure because Andrea was like out for was away for the first half, and then and I was like, for the first quarter and a half, I'm like, oh yeah, she's gonna get home. I'm gonna tell her all about how good we're playing. And then by the time she got home, like right as the halftime siren went, and we'd suddenly found ourselves down by 2 goals already. And she just walked in and goes, oh, how's it going? I was like, it's fucking shit house. And she goes, oh no, just just walks off.
Yeah, well, I
um,
mean, I tried to not be alone. I put the
mm,
message out to see, who was watching the footy, what everyone was up to, and everyone had prior engagements. And so,
weird time
yeah,
of
and
day.
Lucy, my partner, she has no interest in sport whatsoever. She works in child protection, so she's well versed in like managing emotions and whatnot. So when she's around, not that she has to, or should she manage my emotions,
Mhm.
but when I'm around her, I'm like, all right, I gotta, be on the straight and narrow, and I kind of just like absorb it a little bit more.
Mhm.
But yeah, when you think the world's going against you, and like Collingwood are getting the rub of the green, and our players are seemingly bumbling and fumbling into each other and not putting their head over the ball and not contesting marks like
Mhm.
you think they should, or handballing it to no one.
Or it's or just like
Yeah, it just
overrunning it.
compounds.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it was like every single thing. It was like, and I can't even think now. Thinking back, there could be some umpiring decisions that were, but the free kick
Oh,
count
there
in.
were.
Yeah, there probably were.
I don't want to sit on that.
I literally
You
can't
mentioned
think.
the dark arts a lot, and which I agree with. Like
Mm,
sports teams, and especially successful ones, they utilize the dark arts of
it
their
is, yeah.
particular sport to good effect. And
It was the
that was one thing that I
unsociable
feel that,
Hawks, like back in
yeah,
the
yeah, that's
Hawthorn.
a
Yeah,
great
yeah,
example.
yeah.
Um, but Collingwood definitely in those middle quarters, they kind of turned up their dark arts a little bit,
Mm,
on top of other things, genuine footy attributes, but they kind of got away with a little bit too, in my opinion. And like I said, I just watched it again, and there were so many disappointing factors on our side of the fence. There's no denying that, but I'm just like, oh, for fuck's sake, like just something like
yeah,
like stop doing. I tweeted on Saturday about Jordan De Goey holding people before they get the ball,
yeah. That's
and I just
right.
watched it
Yeah.
again, and I was like, vindication. I wasn't seeing things like he's holding Willem Drew's arm when
Mhm.
like Willem Drew was a stopper,
Yeah,
which I found interesting too. That for a period there, Drew was being targeted, which probably goes to the good start to the season that he's having. But yeah, just other
mm,
things, just every little thing, really, and every little thing just pisses you off even more, especially in
yeah,
hindsight when it's all said and done. And I mean, should move on, but and by and large, I have.
yeah,
But yeah, yeah, just the dark arts that they were getting away with, and us seemingly having no answers to it, and not getting a little dirty ourselves, which
mm,
yeah, is anti Port Adelaide traditionally.
yeah. And I guess that's probably the first thing you get into, and it's again. I mean, unfortunately, the game in a way went similar to last year's, the same way to last year over
Hmm.
at the MCG. We didn't get turned around by as much, but it's only because we gave ourselves a little bit of padding. Otherwise, it would have been a very similar scoreline to last year, if not worse. Collingwood's inaccuracy toward like laid down the towards the end of the game probably helped save it from being even worse than it was. But the contested numbers, I know last year I think we were minus 60 or something like that. It was ridiculous last year. It wasn't quite as bad this time round, but it was minus 41 in the contested ball. And I think it was, I just was looking at some random articles today, and Mark Bickley brought it up on SEN, that we're ranked 15th in the AFL through the first 6 weeks of the season in contested possession, which is, as it says, rivaling the likes of West Coast, Richmond, and Fremantle, which isn't great company to have in that
Mm.
area. Um, and he mentioned in the knockout loss to GWS last year, the contested ball was minus 19. That prelim final to the Dogs back in 2021 was minus 30. It's just like it is a consistent number, a consistent factor in these, and it's not like, um, and I guess the thing is we keep going through these seasons and having these results, and then we do some recruitment and try to change some things and hear that things are changing. And I do see, like, I'm not going to sit there and say I don't see any changes. Like there is some a really good developing midfield. We'll get to that as well because that had a rough day at times. But the contested numbers consistently over the last couple of years, that we keep I'm never expecting us to be just a contested beast side, but we need to level the playing field and being 15th in the league as a team that is aiming to try to finish top four is what we still want at this point. Probably is a little bit off the boil, and certainly in a game like this where we started well and then Collingwood upped their pressure, and I guess that little pressure rating thing that comes up, it said that we were even at one point, pretty
Yeah,
close.
yeah, it was like off the charts.
But I didn't see it, I guess, and that just probably shows that we were just that far. So it was, and it's more like the entire game, like we just weren't positioning right. We just looked shell shocked. It was like fucking what am I thinking of? Tom Hanks in Saving Private Ryan, where the shell goes off on the beach and it does that thing with the sound and everything.
Yeah,
He's kind of
yeah.
slightly not to equate, yeah,
Dream.
not to equate footy with war, but it's often a parallel that people make as far as it's a battle out
War of
there and
attrition.
war, yeah. But I felt like the entire every player that was out in the field for the second and third, well, halfway through the second quarter, right at the point that Will Hoskin Elliott takes
Oh,
that hanger. At that point, we're still 5 goals up almost. I think when Will Hoskins Elliott's knee goes into the back of, I think it was Jordan Sweet or something like that, maybe. That's the moment where the shell went off, like in Saving Private Ryan, and then for the next quarter and a half, it was slow motion, distorted sound, and we were just wandering around looking for our arms. Like it
I
was
had to keep
ridiculous.
looking around to make sure that like my windows and doors were closed because I live in Mawson Lakes, and for those that aren't familiar with that suburb, it was kind of like a fast, like quickly developed suburb in Adelaide where there's a lot of houses very close to each
Mhm.
other. So like my neighbors on either side are quite close, and yeah, I was probably sounding like the bomb in Saving Private Ryan with the amount of cursing and yelling that I was doing. And yeah, it is a little bit embarrassing in hindsight, but yeah, just like checking, like making sure the doors had swung open or anything like that,
Yeah.
and my neighbors didn't think I was a complete psycho.
Just the percussion of your voice yelling fucking
Yeah,
hell just blows the door
yeah,
open. Yeah.
yeah, like yeah, yeah,
Uh,
like Burton, what are you fucking doing? Like, go back to the flight. Yeah,
there was so much going
oh,
on. I can't even like the contested number is the first thing I key in on, but it's not even that. It's just but yeah, I guess just before we move on to the myriad of other factors, like I don't know if there's a quick fix to that. It's just it's probably effort maybe, but then we are we're developing this midfield that's got a bit of finesse to it as well, and we don't want to get like we kind of want to go past the opposition rather than. But when you need to get into a game like this, it's just we need to probably at least alleviate that issue a little bit because that is being 15th in the league can't be is not going to be sustainable if we stay
it's
15th
not
in the
going to win
league.
you a final.
Yeah, if we stay 15th in the league the rest of the way, we're probably finishing at best sixth, fifth through eighth. I don't think you're finishing top four if you contested numbers stay that way, and then yeah, as you said, it's just not sustainable for finals footy either. So
Yeah,
that's one area that you just look at this game and go, they need to find a way to just to leave it. I don't care if you lose by -10 in a game like this against the reigning premier, but losing by -40 odd is just too much.
I
You're
think you'll
giving up too
find
much.
that whenever any team loses by 5 goals plus,
Mhm.
that they're generally losing contested possessions by a high margin. And 6 rounds in, we're 15th in the league, and when we lose and lose badly, like you mentioned some previous matches before, but I tend to remember that like contested possession over the last 4 years has been our one wood, and every time we've won contested possession, we've won the game
Mhm.
essentially, and we've been one of the more winningest teams in the league over the last 4 years. So that would probably say that overall we've probably been pretty good with contested possession. But again, the
Yeah.
predictability of like a game like this, where the pressure lifted to a high degree, and yeah, we just didn't match it. And in saying that, though, like in the second quarter in particular, we started the quarter fairly well. It was a good contest. But even when they started kicking goals, we still had opportunities going forward. And albeit they were limited, much more
Mm,
limited than they were in the first quarter, we had opportunities to kind of just stem the flow of Collingwood a little bit, and just some minor details didn't come off, and mostly due to poor decision making, which again
mm,
is a symptom of a team under pressure. But I'm watching it and I'm like, just do that. Just do
mm,
that. Like, do the smart thing. Like, do the simple thing. And it was a bit like the Richmond game we were talking about, like how there was a period there where Richmond were challenging us again at the MCG, and we were trying to kick ourselves out of trouble. And
mm,
particularly and like it was like the last 8 minutes of the second quarter that the bleeding really started to flow. It was in that moment where they started piling on a couple of goals, 3 goals, that we tried to do that again at the
mm,
MCG, just kick ourselves out of trouble. And this time around, we didn't have a Charlie Dixon sitting on the edge of the center square and the center wing.
mm.
Where I think that we could have, again, like with a young midfield and a young half back line, like I thought we could have possessed the ball or taken some shorter options and worked it around a little bit more. But to Collingwood's credit, they were making a lot of one-on-ones, a lot like we did to Essendon,
Mm,
in their forward 50. And we just played into their trap. And like we couldn't get it past centre for so long. And then getting hurt the other way, their possessions turned to gold, which is a lot like what happened in round 2 last year,
mm.
where everything they touched turned to gold. Every inside 50 they had turned into a score, seemingly. Um, and funnily enough, I think we had a better score conversion per inside 50 with this game, but we
Yeah,
just couldn't
the
get it there particularly in those middle quarters. And for that 45-minute period where we didn't kick a goal, uh,
it's
like it,
ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, it just severely hurt us, and it's so deflating. And I think it was you posted on Twitter about the anxiousness of when the crowd starts to get involved and the noise
Mm,
of affirmation starts to go, work in your favor as the home team, because it definitely did. Uh,
yeah.
I just, yeah. And like, I mentioned that the midfield is fairly young, and like when you look at it, the midfield that we had, so there's no Dixon, there's no Boak,
Mm,
two elder statesmen of our side. And again, senior leadership, as long as they're fit, it's invaluable. But we
mm,
didn't have them. So when you look at our starting midfield, you could say Rosie, Butters, Willem Drew, Miles Bergman, and Jace Burgoyne.
mm.
And then I think they started Sweet. It's all sub what, 24, 25.
Yeah.
So then for me, like while our leadership group is fairly young, and I think overall the leaders probably let us down in some key moments, I'm still looking at, okay, who's below Charlie Dixon and Travis Boak? And I look at people like Ollie Wines, I look at people like Ryan Burton, um, and I think that in some key moments where some key contests needed to be win or some pressure needed to be alleviated, they didn't do what you would expect of a senior player in a AFL football team.
Mm,
And that's probably what disappointed me more. We were in a bit of a discussion with someone on social media about Connor Rosie's performance and his
mm-hmm.
captaincy after the game, which, look, emotions were definitely high
Yeah.
for a large portion of Saturday. And So yes, absolutely. The captain, the vice captain, the leadership group, they need a lift. But when I sit back at it, Butters is in the best players.
Mm,
Houston, I think, is in the best players. And what to make of Willem Drew's game, I don't know. I'd be interested in your thoughts. Probably not his best game in my opinion.
mm,
And I thought SPP, albeit in his second game, acquitted himself pretty well, especially as a forward when the ball, like in a game like this, forwards have a free pass, in my opinion. If it's not
mm,
getting down there, I don't know how you can lay any blame on them for losing the game. And I thought I'll actually get to him a bit later, but just looking at his game overall, they did a pretty reasonable job. So then I go back to in some of those critical moments, Ollie Wines, Ryan Burton, like, I need you to lift. I need
mm.
you to lift. And it's not to say they weren't getting in the right areas. It was just some of the decision making in the moment that really disappointed me. Um, so yeah, like a lot can be put on Connor if you want to, and listeners, I'm sure our listeners have varying opinions and
Mm,
perspectives and whatnot, but for a guy that's had a pretty exemplary start to the year with the load of captaincy on him, he had a bad game. There's no shying away from that. But if you're young captain, like I don't think Joel Selwood was always leading the charge in every single game when he was made captain at a
yeah.
young age. He had senior bodies around him that lifted when he potentially wasn't at his best within game. And other young captains around the league, they're not always the one who have to carry the team and put the team on their back. That's why you've got a leadership group, but that's why you've also got veterans in your side.
Mm, yeah. It was. It's what I found. Yeah, you don't take if Connor Rosie has one bat, like, and it's not like it was a terrible game. It was just below the standards that we expect of him. Um, and I think that was the main point when we had bringing up the conversation on Twitter, which it was nothing personal against the person that said it. It was just someone on Twitter. I won't name him, but it was just someone on Twitter said, "Oh, this is why I didn't want I didn't want Rosie named captain and I had issues with it." And I think all of our point was this is one game. It wasn't terrible. He's 24. He's got a lot of growing to do. And I think everyone that in the process of naming him captain was saying, yes, he's going to grow with this role. That's why I've given, but we're
Mm.
changing things and giving it to a younger and letting them grow with it. Um, and also, if you have that opinion, the decision came down 6 months ago.
Yeah,
You've had 5 weeks of the season to say it. You don't say it now. That's reactionary. Is not you don't extrapolate a whole issue with the fact that you don't think Connor Rosie can be captain after one game. That's bad. That's bad fanning, and I won't stand for it. So I think that was the point there. But yeah, they had a bad game.
mm.
You mentioned Willem Drew. I thought it was just one of those games that he was struggling to have an impact. And as you mentioned, they were targeting him a little bit, which is probably some respect that's coming on him from the opposition coaches and players. I don't think it was terrible though. I think it was just one of those games that once he was part of that group that we would have liked to have stemmed the bleeding a little bit in that middle period of the game, but that was just going past so many people so easily that I can't pin the blame on any. There's no any single one. It's structure and the entire midfield group and the defense and everyone in between the arcs really is just that's where Collingwood could move it so easily in those in that
Yeah,
period of time. Um, you can point to everyone really in that period of time. Just saying it was when we got inside our forward 50. If we could get it there for a period there was a long time we couldn't get it there. We just didn't have enough. We fumble around and let it get out too easily.
yeah, absolutely.
Like missing kicks, missing handballs, positioning bad, and the defense probably had their worst day clearly had their worst day of the year if you just look at it by box
Ah,
score. But
yeah,
Asava got muscled out by Mason Cox. I was fucking pissed off that Mason Cox was having a fucking good game against
Yeah, I
us. I
mean
was like,
that's
God
another
damn
thing.
it.
That's another sour cherry on top for me is when guys like Will Hoskin-Elliott, Pat Lipinski, and Mason Cox are the ones
Yeah, we weren't getting
inflicting
beaten by
high
the ones
level
that we
of
were worried
damage.
about. Yeah.
I'm just sitting in my living room, like pulling my hair out, like, how is this mug fucking doing this to us? Like,
Mm.
yeah, like four. I think Lipinski kicked 4 goals, and it's a personal best for him. And I
We
think
always let that
bit of
happen at
junk,
some point,
bit
I
of
feel
junk
like.
time, but
Yeah.
yeah, I know, and that again feeds the demon.
It does, doesn't it?
But yeah, it's just like fucking hell, like.
Mm.
And I mean, Dacos had a fantastic game, and I haven't looked at Degoe's stats, but I'm sure he had a fantastic game too. He seemed to be in and around it. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
they're better players. So yeah, it's just yeah, like
That was the
Will
thing.
Hoskin-Elliott. I can't believe he's still playing, to be honest. Um,
He's played 200 odd games at this point, I think.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's fair. Yeah,
Good on
yeah.
him. He's had a
He,
great AFL career, and he is a true role player. But I don't want to be seeing a role player taking speckies on.
yeah, was it Kane Corns that said he turned into prime Jeremy Cameron or something like that? We
Yeah,
like
because he
just
was
saying
going up and down
he
the
was,
ground
yeah.
all day.
He's fine for marks in the forward 50 and kicking goals, and then he's like up and down the ground. It's just like Will Hoskin Elliott's popping up out of fucking nowhere. And it's just like Jesus fucking Christ.
Seemingly,
I
yeah.
didn't, yeah. Um, so yeah, that's probably another factor in the game. Is probably the defense. We still probably saw a sign of them gelling, and the teething issues that are coming from that. I thought Aaliyah had some good moments. But then he had some bad. I mean, the first goal, I had it in my notes. I kept some diligent notes for the first 2 quarters, and then they just fall away in the second and third quarter because I think I just
Yeah,
leant
just
back on the couch. It was like,
scribbling on your notepad,
yeah,
like
just
drawing a hangman or something.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, just like the card, like Looney Tunes cartoon where you draw the hangman, but then you pull the rope out of the notepad and just hang yourself because
Put it on yourself. Yeah.
um, but yeah, my notes in the first quarter was just like, yeah, Leah's got a good moment. But then that first goal came from him, like that delivered out of bounds. Is like that's the kind of shit I
Oh,
don't.
that was so silly. And he
It's
had
just
a
like
player there that he could have
it's just even just make more of an effort at the ball.
just
Try to
grab it
jump,
and be tackled over the
just
line.
grab. Yeah, it was just like he taps it towards the line. I was just like,
Tap.
and I have just tap it in. Except
Don't
don't tap
tap
it in.
it.
Tap to keep it in, not tap it out. But yeah, it was fucking hell. That was just one of those moments. I was like, okay, how switched on are they? Because but then the rest of the quarter went fine after that, mostly.
Oh,
So, but yeah, that was one of those moments. And then Sava gets muscled out. There was another moment when I was watching back the KO mini that there's just a ball comes in towards the defensive 50 and Asava goes up for a chest mark and it kind of just it's a
and he just drops it.
contested chest mark, but it kind of slips through and ends up at the
And
back
it
somewhere
somehow
and
gets
it's
out the back.
to
I don't know how
to
that.
three fucking Collingwood players that are all swarming on it and one of them gets it and
Yeah.
they
Because
kind of bounce.
because I'm sure his like Asava's teammates were like, oh, all we have to do is protect him and he'll
Yeah.
take this chest mark. And then somehow it goes over the lot of them. And
Yeah.
it's
What's it?
just I think
Well,
that
it
was a
does it.
Lipinski goal.
Yeah, it
Like,
was. I
just
think it
like, who
was
the fuck is this
Lipinski.
guy?
Yeah, yeah. So it was. There's a lot. There was a lot going on, but there's a lot that you can say. Look, there's midfield didn't have their best day. Defense. It all comes together in the fact that every line had an average day. Forwards, as you said, arguably you could say they did everything they could with the opportunities they had. I mean,
Yeah.
they gave themselves a platform. I think Palpepper, as you said, he had a decent game. I had him
Yeah.
on my watch list
So
last week, and he certainly
George
looked.
with 3, Todd with 2, SPP with 2.
Hmm.
With the team sans Charlie Dixon, you're looking at that and going, oh, I'm okay. That's like before the game, you're going, I'm happy with that.
That's a
The
platform.
midfielders chip
Yeah.
in, small forwards, grab a couple each or between them or whatever. And you go, okay, cool. Like, good game.
Mm.
Yeah. And we kick straight.
Yeah.
So
I did that. I did have
like,
that in my notes in a snarky sense to be like, hey, the accuracy was pretty good, wasn't it? What
yeah,
a, you know,
yeah,
I don't think there's too many Collingwood fans out there going, God, we kicked 17 goals, 21. That sucks.
yeah.
Um,
Fuck that. Fuck Craig McRae. Like, they can't even kick straight. Like, we're gonna lose games because of this.
Oh, yeah. I gotta get back to my notes. I was going into Twitter there for a second to find that stuff from before,
It's
but
dangerous.
yeah. I didn't go on there too much after the game for a while. I did sit up and drink beers and watch the rest of the footy of the day, and
I know
then
you were in pretty good form, to be honest, on Twitter afterwards.
I
Just
get into
hijacking everyone's tweets. It's a pretty A grade gifts, to be honest. And sorry, listeners, if you're not on Twitter, and but
yeah.
I just had to put it out there. You could tell that you were feeding the beast a little bit.
I've had 6 beers and I'm feeling snarky. Yeah, I get very self-deprecating because I'm like, what the fuck else am I meant to do? I'm either
But
going to cry or
there was one. I don't even know what the tweet was, but then you replied with that scene from Interstellar with Matthew McConaughey, just
oh,
bawling his eyes out and just hitting
when he's
hitting the
watching himself
watching
leave on the
himself.
mission.
Yeah.
Yeah. A great movie, by the way. But yeah, yeah. No, that was I think it was Todd the painter on Twitter. He's just like, I think it was he knew the result, but he did a tweet like, "I've just finished some work. I'm sitting down to watch the game. I haven't seen anything since the first quarter. I'm looking forward to the rest of it." And yeah, it was just the Interstellar. Like, no, don't,
Yeah,
don't,
don't do it. Don't do it. Yeah,
just
yeah.
watch the
I got a
yeah.
good laugh out of that because yeah, football. I just like didn't want to know about it after our game,
Hmm.
which was shit. Because yeah, I was on Donny's disposal last night, and I had to admit to him that yeah, look, footy just was a bad word. It
It
was a
ceases
sour
to
taste in my
exist.
mouth. So all the games, bar the Derby, I just didn't pay any attention to.
Yeah. Oh, good times. So yeah, I guess I guess we would be remiss if we didn't touch on it because it is the story out of the it is it will get
Yes,
to
yes.
I wonder
I
if
think I know what you're gonna say.
well, like Hinkley, the question is always, was
Are
that
you
what you
gonna
thought?
talk about the flat track bullies line?
Well, that's what I was going to get to that too, because I do have that in my notes. Like, I was thinking of like, you know, the meme where it's like, "Are we the baddies?" I'm like, in my head, I'm like, "Are we the flat track bullies?" Like,
Yeah, I have
which
I
it
did
goes a
do a bit
lot,
of a
goes a
dive
lot.
into that too. So yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
because I think
but
where did I
I
get to?
interrupted you there.
Yeah, I'll let you go into it in a second. But yeah, it was Matt Turner on Twitter, which I think I don't actually know. Is he the advertiser or what he is? I can't remember.
Yeah, I believe he
Yeah.
is. I
He
believe he's cruise leaning too.
Yeah, I don't actually know if I follow him. It's kind of like, you know, your For You
He
page a
always
lot
pops
pops
up.
up. Yeah, and he don't like don't always, but he did bring up a stat, and you can't argue with stats. Um, just the away struggles, which were 0-8 on the road against the eventual top six in 2022 and 2023. Last year losing by 71 to Collingwood on the road, 50 to Carlton, 48 versus Brisbane. And then he ended the tweet with saying, you know, capitulated in their first big road test of 2024. Hard to argue with it. And then obviously then that is the storyline because then I think it was the Footy with Broden podcast, which is very fun. I like my
Yeah.
somewhat comedic podcast. Two guys, one cup. Be careful when you Google that podcast. It's two guys, one cup. Will Anderson and Charlie Corson. Do not
Two
make a mistake.
guys.
Two
Two
guys, one
guys.
cup. Do not make a mistake when you're Googling looking for that podcast. I beg of you. But
Yeah.
yeah, the Footy with Broden, they talked about, they said Port Flat Track Bullies, and I think it came up on a few other shows
Oh, of
across
course
it.
it did.
And
Yeah.
it is we have had some good games against good teams over the last few years, but unfortunately sometimes it's either the Melbourne game last year, which was good. We had a few good wins last year, but then the Melbourne game this year is like a heartbreaking loss. But then you go to Melbourne. I think the big thing is the MCG games against the big teams like Collingwood the last couple of years have been embarrassing, and that's the problem. It feeds into that idea, and then
Yeah.
obviously the Ken Hinkley question. You and I and people that listen to the podcast know that we're pretty level-headed with this. That is the question that always comes up: is like, what are we doing at this point with the team? So now that I've led you in with all that, you sound like you've got some thoughts. I'm gonna,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
one loss against one bad loss against what
mm.
many think is a contender, and this line always
Well, they're
gets
the reigning
drawn
premiers
out.
as well. We got to remember
Reigning
that they are,
premiers
they
off a
are.
bye who were pretty full strength compared to a team with several outs.
Mhm.
And look, sure, like, yeah, I can make all the excuses under the sun, or I can go hard like a lot of people coming out of the woodwork on social media tend to do in a time like this. But what I will say is, and I think you're in the same boat, is that I'm not a Hinkley hater.
Mhm.
I think that under his coaching tenure, we have actually developed a lot of respect in the AFL landscape, but we haven't done the thing that we expect to do.
Mhm.
Granted, and I hate that. I all the opportunities we've missed, I wish we would have taken. But I don't hate the guy,
Mhm.
but I'm content for change or to change.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so I'll just put that out there. As well as that is I don't like to dwell in the fact that I want or that we could, should, or would change. And I don't like to let that affect good moments, like good games of football,
Mhm.
good games by players in our football team who, by and large, are going to be there after he eventually goes anyway. I don't I don't understand that. It's not my perspective. I don't want to bring the fact that I think we could benefit from some change or whatnot. Let me like
Yeah. It
not
doesn't have to
enjoy
be.
football.
It doesn't have to be
Um,
mutually exclusive that you don't enjoy the games and enjoy
yeah,
the good things, but also you can say, hey, like, because I've said it over the years, is I will be, content, as you said, content with change if it happens, because there is, that is probably the elephant in the room at this point is like we've recruited a couple of times but we're not going to sit here and be like, while he's still there as coach, like, are we just going to boycott the team, burn MM? We're not those types of fans either. So we've got to find a happy medium to continue to exist and not lose our minds and do the Looney Tunes cartoon noose. Anyway, sorry,
yeah.
I
Well,
interrupted. I just wanted to add
no,
my
it's all valid.
agreeance to your point there. That
I do
yeah,
think it's
it's a touchy
interesting.
subject. So
I do think it's interesting that the narrative has changed over the tenure of Ken Hinkley, because I remember after that, obviously, golden couple of years at the start, it
mm,
was we can't make top four under Hinkley. And then obviously 4 years ago, we made top four, we finished minor
mm,
premier. And then it was like, you can't beat top eight sides. And now it's you can't beat top four sides. So while I'm sure you've got a litany of statistics that back that up, and I've seen all the big footy copy and
mm,
pasting that goes on, and you have to admit that you're still changing your narrative to suit
mm,
your attitude towards the coach and the club. Okay, that's okay. But anyway, I did a bit of a dive last night, and I looked at the last 10 premiers and their records against the eventual top eight sides in the on the ladder in those respective years. And because obviously the flat track bullies line always comes out when it comes to Port Adelaide and Ken
mm,
Hinkley sides, but it's never leveraged against anything else. It's
mm,
only leveraged against ourselves. There's no other top eight sides from any of these years that didn't win the premiership and their records against top eight sides. So like without doing that much of a deep dive, I thought I would just look at the eventual premiers of the last 10 years and what their records were against top eight sides. So the last 3 years have actually been a, a bit of an anomaly, in the grand scheme of things, where the last 3 years the minor premiers have actually won the premiership, which for a very, very long time was an extreme rarity.
Mm-hmm.
So taking that into it, like and to be the minor premier, you're obviously going to win a lot of games and not lose very many. So Collingwood 6-4 against top 8 sides with a 60% win rate. Geelong 6-2, 75%, and Melbourne 7-2, 77.77%. That's fantastic.
Mm.
They've also lost games against teams who have finished outside the 8. That's just a side note. So you leverage that. But then Richmond in 2020 had a win rate against top 8 sides of 57.14%, 4 wins, 2 losses, and a draw. So to leverage that, last year Port Adelaide went 5-3 against top 8 sides, which is 62.5% win rate, which is actually better than Collingwood. 2022 gets bundled in with these statistics, especially on footy media and particularly in some of these big footy forums. But I don't know how you can realistically factor that in when we had, again, this is probably going to sound like an excuse to a lot of people, but we had 21 in-season surgeries and we played most of that year with half a full-strength side. We went 2-9 against top 8 sides at a win rate of 18.8. 1%.
And that entire
we
season
weren't
was just a bit, yeah.
And I noticed, I think it was on the Footy Furnace that, and maybe even First Crack, that they're using the top 8 statistics from 2022. So then when you go back to 2021, Melbourne, obviously the premier that year, we went 4-4, 50%. In 2020, we went 4-3. Again, the exact same top 8 winning percentage as Richmond, who were the eventual premiers, 57.14%. But just to go even further back than that, I'm not going to compare Port Adelaide because it's getting a bit far back, but it's just an interesting note that you don't necessarily have to have a fantastic record against top 8 sides during the home and away season to then eventually become the premiers. Because at the end of the day, if you're a top 8 side, you're generally going to lose against top 8 sides. So West Coast in 2018, 66% win rate, which is fantastic. 2017, Richmond, 50% win rate. Western Bulldogs in 2016, 44.4% win rate against the top 8. Obviously a famous premiership coming outside the top 4. Hawthorn in
7th, they finished the regular season.
Yeah. Hawthorn in 2015, another fantastic year. 6-2, 75% win rate. 2014, I know, obviously a very sensitive year for Port Adelaide. 5-5 against top 8 sides at a win rate of 50%. So, in those ones where I haven't listed Port Adelaide, I understand that we had a pretty fucking terrible record against top 8 sides. But what I wanted to illustrate was the fact that it's
that a lot of these teams
whether you
have
have
to
a
have
fantastic record or not in the home and away season means fuck all. But, and this is what the big footy parade or brigade will come back. It's winning the finals. And I understand that, and I hate it just as much as everyone else. We haven't done the job in finals, and that all the statistics that I've just listed, essentially, they count for nothing, really. But I just find it interesting that these statistics, and it's footy media in a nutshell, they always get brought up, but they're never leveraged against anything. So I just wanted to confirm my own bias, whatever you want to call it, feed my own kind of apologist perspective, just to have a look at who won the premiership and what was their record like against top 8 sides in that year. Because in my opinion, you should be beating the bottom 10.
You should be
Yeah.
flat track
Well,
Bullies,
and like
and then go
further
run
to
it.
that,
Yeah,
like Hawthorn in 2015, a 75% win rate against top 8 sides, but then they lost 4 to teams outside the 8, and it's just
yeah.
like but what it just shows is that all you have to do, and it's what all the AFL coaches talk about, is all you have to do in the home and away season is get to finals in the best possible position. And Ken says that himself. But
Mm.
Craig McRae also said that last year. All the other premiership coaches would say the exact same fucking thing. You just have to get there in the best possible spot, and you need an ounce of luck. Every
And,
sport in the
and
world, you need an ounce of luck. You need a
mhm.
healthy team. And unfortunately, at different stages in some of our finals campaigns, we've either haven't had the luck, we haven't had the team, but most importantly, which I admit, and I'm with everyone on this, we haven't been mentally strong in some
Mhm.
important moments, which does, again, it probably squashes everything that I've just said, and it's out there, and I understand it, and I'm just as frustrated as everyone else. But when media wants to bring out these stats, just have it in the back of your mind that home and away wins, as long as you're notching them up, that's all that really fucking matters.
Mm. Yeah, no, that was a great, like, a great, I don't know, a great soliloquy, I guess, on kind of that history, because we do sometimes forget that all the premiership teams have to have a strong season against the bottom 8. So, flat track Bullies, so to speak, but then they have to just run it, 50% or let, as some of those sides you mentioned ran at 77 or whatever percent. But, beyond that, you have to, coaches, especially modern coaches, talk about building a season, building into the season. You have your, KPIs that you meet throughout the season and just get to the finals in healthy shape. And that's unfortunately what we didn't do last year. Um, but yeah, it's, really, and you do so, and that's the thing is, like, I think a lot of the not beating the top 8 seat sides thing gets, as you said, gets blown out of proportion. But it does come into, then you bring in the factor about mental fortitude, I guess, to get through those games. That's probably what the more of the issue, rather than the stats get brought up because that's what the footy shows have to do. But for us as fans, we actually look at it from the mental side, and that's where you do say that we agree. We're frustrated because we want to see a mentally tough Port side that doesn't acquiesce to an opposition,
Yeah.
because even though I'm 36, I my first memories were like the 94, 95 Port sides, watching them on TV, but I didn't have I was 7, 8 years old. Don't remember. I didn't actually have the full understanding of what tough football was. I was just like, these guys are fucking good.
Mm.
I don't actually don't think I was saying fucking at that age, but I grew up in a farm. I learned that word pretty early. So,
Yeah. And you're a Port
um,
Adelaide supporter,
yeah,
so
exactly. Um, but I think that's probably where like a lot of the frustration actually comes from. I think a lot of people use the records and stuff as a crux to add to their feelings, to legitimize whatever they're feeling. But it actually is
yeah.
more of a vibes and eye test thing, that we look at the side, as we did on the weekend against Collingwood, and go, they just didn't look up for the fight. Once the fight came, they didn't look up for it, and that's what you go. And then sometimes I think I push back on people that, and again, I'm critical of Hinkley, and I am ready for change if and when it happens. Again, I'm not going to lose my mind about it not happening right now, because what am I going to do?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
as I said, I'm critical, and there will be reasons that I will agree with a change if it happens. But at the moment, Hinkley's there, and the thing is, a lot of these players that we all love, and I hope, and all the people that hate Hinkley want to see a new coach come in and take over the players they love. A lot of these players love Hinkley as well. So it's just like there is AFL good sporting teams that win championships, whatever sports they are, NBA, soccer, NFL, whatever sport it may be. I'm just watching watching NHL playoffs are on right now, and if you just one of the best times of the year for a sports fan because hockey playoffs are fucking insane. But it all comes down to a symbiotic relationship between coaching and players and everyone's attitudes matching up. And that's just where I think we've fallen down time and time again. And I think it's where we fell down on the weekend again. And that's again the test throughout the rest of the season. But if we can we're 4-2 at the moment. And I guess this is a kind of good way to segue into just talking about this as a block of the season now, as we did.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, the result on the weekend does sour it a little bit for me because I go,
absolutely.
we're 4-2.
Yeah, it's how you lose that people
Yeah,
care most about.
yes, we're 4-2. We're in a good spot after the first 6 weeks, but it is a trepidatious 4-2 because we do look at that result and go, we haven't won.
Shit.
Yeah,
Now we're vulnerable.
yeah, the Essendon result maybe looks better than it did a few weeks ago. The Freo one looks worse. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
it's
It's just footy to me. Like
and I think
every team gave up at least. Sorry, every game over the weekend there was a 7 or 8 goal swing to one side, and then I think the Hawthorn North game it was a 6 goal swing to Hawthorn.
I had another stat I wanted to bring up.
GWS like succumbed to a 7 goal swing against Carlton.
Yeah, which is funny watching that
control. Like
watching that game immediately after our game, going, there's another team like us that are trying to contend with the Victorian teams, and they've gone down to Victoria, had what they thought was a game-winning lead, albeit later in the game, and
it's very hard to win away. I'm pretty sure that some of the footy experts have spoken about that literally this year. In regards to, I think, Collingwood and Brisbane starts to the year about dropping games because then you have to pick them up somewhere else, especially Brisbane, who've lost 3 at home.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard to win away from home.
There was a stat, that's where I'm going, Twitter. All right, I'm just bouncing back and forth between apps. So Swamp Thing, this is probably one of I did put the tweet up. With the Dave Chappelle, like some crack.
Is it the quarters?
Yeah. Well, he said, just 5 of the last 7 premiers have given up runs of 8+ goals at some point in the season. Then he said 5 of the last 6 premiers, if you ignore the 2020 short quarter season. So I was just like, oh, that means we're winning the premiership. Cool. Flag pair. Let's go.
Well,
but that speaks to what you were saying.
Sydney gave up a goalless quarter, like all the stereotypes that people attribute to our side under Hinkley. Like, if you actually just opened your eyes a little bit, you would find that maybe except for Geelong, because they're a fucking good club, they're probably one of the best football clubs in the modern era. As much as I hate to fucking say that, like those words coming out of my mouth, like just
kind of makes you want to go like, mom, I'll go get the soap myself. I'll do it. I don't even care.
Like all of these issues actually happen all around the league. It's a professional fucking sporting league. And it's sport at the end of the day. The biggest problem is that a lot of those clubs have either had one moment of success or they've made change. I get it. I can't argue with that. But a lot of the things that tend to come up aren't outside the realms of possibility within a professional sporting league. Yeah. Like, so maybe I'm bringing this up with passion because I want to distract myself from how disappointing Saturday was. But, or maybe you as a listener is in a frame of mind where you don't know where you sit and you need a little bit of perspective and you're open to perspective. And if you're like me and you like to be fucking sane and you actually like to still enjoy the little things within a football season, regardless of how you feel about the fucking coach, I don't know. Maybe I've helped you. Maybe I've made you angry. There's probably going to be one of two people in in those baskets. But yeah, uh, I mentioned after the Demons lost that we failed our first test. And as Ken said in his post-match presser, they're two different losses, whether you like to admit it or not. The fact of the matter is, though, that they're losses. And whether you want to count Freo as a test, I'll leave that up to you. I don't know. It's a test of sorts. Should it have been a test? We'll find out throughout the rest of the season. But our first two real tests against sides that people genuinely believe are going to contend for the top four, we failed them.
Yeah, well,
But like I said, after the Melbourne loss, we failed tests in the last, 3 out of the last 4 years where we've actually been contending. We've failed tests early in the season, just to finish the season in a healthy position. So most people would have, like in our preseason chats, we expected to be either 4-2 or, with a stroke of luck, 5-1 at this point in the season. Excuse me. And we're 4-2. I said last night on Donny's disposal that after such a shit loss against Collingwood, like the thoughts ruminating is like, fuck, we've given up, we're giving up our spot on the ladder essentially, but we're fifth.
Yeah.
Still got a healthy percentage. And the fact that we stayed fifth just shows that our issues are issues for a lot of the other sides in and around where we are, essentially, except for Geelong at the moment. A lot of sides around us have had an embarrassing loss. They've had some handsome wins, but by no means, like, this season is not over at all. And yeah, we'll probably win enough games to finish in a healthy position.
Yeah.
But we want that nourishment of of beating a contender, and the sooner the better. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's probably where it comes to start wrapping up kind of that part of the podcast is like, it is just people want that safety net of knowing, oh, we've got to win against a contending side or a side that, has a resume, and we want to have that little safety net, that little cuddle that says, okay, we can beat them. And it felt like that we had that after a quarter and a half, and then it all went to shit. So and that's just where we haven't had that win in a few years. It felt like the Melbourne win last year felt like one of those, and we had a couple last year, but
yeah, absolutely.
we still didn't. Yeah, we haven't had, like, like Collingwood dominated us on the weekend, and we went into the game as a team. Collingwood were the bookies' favourites as well, which is what people forget, I think. But that's neither here nor there, really. We just want to see our style of footy match up with the best, and we just haven't seen it, and it hasn't even been close at times in these kind of real iron to the fire moments. So that's where and you've said it plenty already, and I completely concur. We agree with that criticism, and it's just trying to find the balance of going, okay, this is the side and the coach we've got going forward. We need to find the ways forward rather than start trying to, get the pitchforks out. It's just like, this is what we've got at the moment. Until a change is made, let's try to work through, find out how we can find a way forward with what we've got until the situation changes.
Yeah.
We can't do much about it on a podcast apart from talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I can just make one last point,
Absolutely.
I think it was Philip Downs on Twitter mentioned in a conversation that he thinks the club is waiting for the Alan Scott moment, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. I do think there is a bit of that in Hinkley still being around, that they want us to get to finals healthy, have that stroke of luck, and get over that hurdle and win the premiership, so he can stand up and go, look, I told you so. And I do think there's a bit of truth in that. I would still be fucking happy if that were to happen.
I think I put it on Twitter a couple of years ago that I'd get a "Yes We Can" tattoo on my butt, and I will. Probably,
Yeah,
probably that
like
one and a more nicer tattoo somewhere else. But yeah, it's yeah, no, we all want, like, no one's going to be unhappy with that at the end of the day. I think there actually might be a few people that would strangely be unhappy with it, but
unhappy with it. Yeah, I agree.
that's the real right wings of Port Twitter, I guess. But otherwise, yeah, that we all, yeah. But it is an interesting. The club's just in a rock and a hard place situation,
Absolutely.
and they were in that when they did the extension last year, because it was like, you know, conventions say that when a coach is performing that well at that time, that you should give them an extent. It was just like the extenuating circumstance of the history made it difficult
Yeah.
for the fans.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's yeah. There's a long way to go this season, and as we'll get into the awards and stuff. So, did you have anything else before we get into that stuff in your notes there?
Um,
You've been quite diligent with your note.
no.
You actually had some fairly good stuff. I was like really just worried about what I was going to talk about on this one at some point. I had plenty of notes, but you've taken the lead very well, so I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, look, I think by and large, I've said what I want to say.
There's a few stats I've
We
got that I was
like,
saving for the awards, but yeah.
yeah, like we all know that we didn't maintain the rage,
hmm
and and Collingwood caught fire. I
Yeah.
still think that much like the Melbourne loss, there's some very fixable things about that, like that we can change over the course of the next, month and the rest of the season. We've got
hmm
a pretty interesting month, that game included. Um, and look, yeah, I still think that if we're putting our best team on the park, and yeah, they get a bit of a rocket, some decision making.
hmm
That would have been a pretty harsh review yesterday, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Um, I still think there's a lot that's fixable, in this loss that can bridge the gap.
hmm
That I'll finish on that.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. All right. Before we get into the awards part of it, the spotlight, which will be an interesting one out of this week. I get to go first on this one.
Sure.
So my positive, it feels that I think low hanging fruit is just something we say often here, but I feel like I have to give this one some positive light, and just for his whole season. Um, Dan Houston, I think, has just been ticking along beautifully all year, and he's probably been in my thoughts over the last few weeks. So I was like, no, I'm going to hold off, and then after this week being a game that didn't go as well as it could have, obviously, I just thought I had to give it to Dan Houston, because he was he'll come up in my votes later on in the show, which I don't think is going to be any surprise. But his stats for the year, I had a quick look. He's ranked 13th in the league for kicks per game, second for meters gained and total meters gained as well. Meters gained per game, but just total meters gained as a number. 20th in the league in effective disposals per game. Just I think he's one of four players still. I can't remember which one of Supercoach or for fantasy, whichever one is. He's one of four
Yeah,
players left that is
with a
getting
hundred each week.
100 points each
Yeah,
week.
I saw that today.
Yeah, I think I shared it on the Instagram story on the Creed Instagram, so follow that if you're not. But um, just in form, like I always wonder how it goes when a player like Dan Houston gets an All Australian jacket. Will he back it up the next year? Not so much his play, but sometimes the selection committees might go, "Oh, we'll give it to someone." But I feel like he's in the form that, if he continues this way the rest of the year, he'd almost be in line at least for the 40, if not a jacket again, because he's just seems to have gone on from strength to strength and really believes in his leadership. I think is pretty good. We were talking about it earlier. I think just what he's doing on the ground. Yeah, I'm just really pleased with how he's going about his season this year. He's a definite plus. We don't exactly have plus minuses, but I just think of like his influence in a game whenever he's on the field. In this game, obviously, it was mitigated just because it was just a disaster around him. But he seemed pretty classy throughout the game. I think I've got some stats that I've got that I'll bring up in the votes later on. But just overall, I think he was probably one of the shining lights of a game that went pretty terribly. And just throughout the season so far, he's been a real shining light for me. And I think had to highlight his positive attributes on this side. After 6 weeks, he's
Yeah, yeah. It's a
definitely
good
my
block of
definitely my spotlight for the week.
yeah, yeah, not much to argue with there. And like you said, after getting an All-Australian jacket, like how do you back that up? And in the modern iteration of a high half back, he's
Mm,
doing all the things that you would want and what the kind of All-Australian selectors would be looking for.
mm,
So yeah, I don't, and the funny thing is that I don't think he's had an absolutely just jaw-dropping game. He's just started at a high level and
mm.
maintained that throughout the first six
He's
weeks
like,
of our
what's
season.
that?
So,
What's that thing in your desk that has the balls and it just ticks back and forth?
Newton's cradle.
Yeah, is that what that's called? I've never actually known.
Yeah,
I've just always known of it. Like if
yeah,
it's in, yeah, because I loved
yeah.
him as a
Newton's
kid. I was
cradle.
just, yeah. He's just that. He's just ticking back and forth, just
Tick, tick,
tick,
tick.
tick, tick. Yeah, he's just, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
No,
I
great one.
apologize
Great
to the
one.
people watching on YouTube that just see me doing this for a couple of seconds there. Probably,
Being a composer.
yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. No, fantastic. I mean, mine is probably in a similar vein. But after his game on Saturday, I just needed to highlight Jason Horne-Francis
Mm,
because when it was all seemingly falling to shit, he was one player that still didn't look overawed by the occasion.
hmm
And at 20 years of age, like it's just maturity beyond his years.
hmm
Um, like yeah, when the pressure was on, he was still finding ways out of traffic, still looking for genuine outlets forward, and more or less making smart decisions. Um, his breakaway was there. His I haven't actually looked at his contested possessions, but he was 13 contested possessions, so which was a
Which is,
clubhouse leader for
yeah,
Port. So
out of 24
so
possessions
yeah,
total. Yeah,
like
yeah. He was getting in. He was getting in and getting dirty, and as well as having his classy
yeah,
moments as well. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. At the
Um.
end of the day, when there was limited players who actually played 4 quarters, and in particular when the heat was really on, he was one that was still carrying a heavy load in a midfield that was dropping the ball, for want
Yeah.
of a better term.
hmm Yeah. No, I really enjoyed it. And again, just to share, not that they know us at all, but the listening to the Footy with Broden podcast, they talked about him a bit because they did another section on the podcast where they just randomly just named 8 players that like the 8 top future stars of the league, and they named Horne-Francis in there. Like this is players in the 21 to you know um, you know, drafted age, and yeah, they talked about him for a bit, just saying his breakaway speed is just he's special, and the fact that he's rounded out his game, as you said, with finding a way, because this was the kind of game last year that he probably would have only had 12, 13 disposals possibly because he couldn't
Yeah,
find a way into the game.
yeah,
But
that's a good call.
this game he had 24 disposals, had a goal. I think he's one of few players in the league that's averaging over 20 disposals a game, 10 contested possessions a game, as well as a goal a game. I think there's only 4 or 5 players that are averaging
That's
20,
interesting.
20, 20, 10, and 1. I think Rosie's the other one possibly. I think there's 4 or 5, and 2 of them are poor players. But
Yep.
Horne-Francis is definitely one of them, averaging at least 20 disposals, 10 of them contested, and then 1 goal a game. So yeah, some metrics, especially at, as you said, 20 years of age, is maturity and impact beyond his years. And I know we've got some generational, Western Australia is about to be renamed Reed Australia, I
Reedville.
think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is some generational youngsters getting around, but HORNE-FRANCIS is definitely one of them, which is fucking great for us. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, absolutely ecstatic to have him on our side, and I really, really look forward to how he progresses in his years.
yeah, absolutely. Now for my watch for some improvement over the next couple of weeks, I might ruffle some feathers with this one. I'm actually going for a duo, and I'm going to just highlight.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm breaking convention here, but I couldn't pick one or the other, and I just wanted to, and I guess to highlight what this segment is about. It's not so much picking players that are just bad and threatening to be dropped, because these two will never be dropped as long as they're fit. But it's just this week was a somewhat disappointing week for Butters and Rosie as a duo, as the leadership group of the team. And I'm really interested to see how they back up the next 2 weeks, because obviously this week is St Kilda Friday night game. We should win the game. We'll get to that in a bit. But week after is a showdown, and obviously we've had a pretty rough trot in that game over the last year
Yeah.
or so.
Hmm.
And this is, I think, the next couple of weeks is a real litmus test for just where they are. It's not like, and it's not like trying to be the person on Twitter that was just like, this is a bad decision. I think these two are absolutely leaders going forward, and they will find their way. But this is probably their first test of the year, was getting both of them getting a little bit beaten badly at times in the game on the weekend. And um, my watch for that, and I think anyone that listens to the show knows how much I love these two, adore these two. Like, I will ride and die for these guys. But I just had to, I looked at that game. I was like, I could have picked Burton, but I feel like I think I brought him up at some point in the past. There were some others that I could have picked, but I thought just my watch, that I genuinely am interested as more of an observer of just where they go from a game like this. I am genuinely interested how they back up the next couple of weeks after this game. So it's slightly abstract. It's not completely
Mm.
negative, because I think Butters had a reasonable game in the end. He just went away a little bit in the middle part of the game, and Rosie just probably had a bad game, a little bit fumbly. He's still got his 20 odd disposals, but just a little bit fumbly. Um, so it's slightly abstract, but that was genuinely, as I was thinking about this segment, I was just like, these are the two I'm really interested in seeing what the next week or two is like for them after. Even Frio was a little bit up and down for them both as well. So it was just one. I just had to go a little bit abstract on it.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. And I mean, a watch is a watch, right? Like there's something
Yeah.
to watch.
Hmm.
So, um, yeah, 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 yeah. You look to see how everyone bounces back,
Yeah.
whether it be in game or between games, and
Hmm.
now they've got an opportunity to respond on a game where they lowered their colors for the first time in a little while.
Yeah.
So,
And it's really just because I'm
um,
hoping that they do bump it up the next couple of weeks, and then I can
yeah,
come
a
back and
couple
go,
of tough weeks for Rosie as well.
yeah.
Still doing some things right, but wouldn't be in his highlight reel for sure.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, interesting one, but yeah, definitely one to watch. Um, so yeah, I'm going to go for Ryan Burton. I have been, you know,
Almost went there myself, but I thought it might come up
simmering,
anyway.
simmering along.
Hmm.
But and at the end of the day, like 22 disposals, 72% disposal efficiency, 5 rebound 50s, 428 meters gained. Like some of these things on paper, 4 marks, you're going, nah, that's a pretty good game. And the funny thing is that Donny had him in his team of the week. He kicked a goal, obviously, which was a very Ryan Burton at the MCG kind of goal.
Hmm.
Um, But some of these simple halfback type statistics aren't what I'm judging him on. It's
Yeah.
like I said in our wrap up of the game, it's not handballing it into space where two Collingwood players can run onto it, and not kicking it into space where there's no Port player, and it's attacking a ground ball when you're the one that needs to attack it. It's not getting in the way of a player in better position to attack a ball. And like I said, I don't know how old he is now, but when you don't have Charlie Dixon and you don't have Travis Boak, that elder statesman role then filters down to the likes of you when the pressure is really on. And albeit the defense were under a lot of pressure for a long period of time there, and there's only so much that you can deal with. But some of these issues were when he was occupying in the midfield. I just found it really disappointing on Saturday. And it's happened a few times this year where, for whatever reason, he's getting in people's way. His some of his disposals are just mind-boggling, like head-scratching, what he's actually thinking. And for a player that a couple of years ago, and like he had his injury battles 2 or 3 years ago, and either side of that, he had some games where you're just like, this guy is fantastic, like really making an impact on games. And for whatever reason, the last 18 months have just been a little odd from a Ryan Burton perspective. Obviously being chucked around last year positionally, seemingly unaccountable on occasions in defense. And I just don't know what to make of it, because you see Ryan Burton's name on that sheet and you should think that you've got nothing to worry about. And maybe those injuries are catching up with him, and he is actually a little bit slower, and he's not that jet that he was, 6 years ago or whatever. But Saturday's game just kind of topped off some stuff simmering under the surface in regards to some really head-scratching decisions or non-decisions.
As I said when I was talking about mine, he almost ended up in mine, so it's kind of probably worked out well that you ended up bringing him up.
Yeah.
It's not even. I can't even pinpoint any exact moment. I have to have to. It's just like there's certain just contests that you see him come in at, and you just go like, what exactly is your role in this contest? Because you kind of you're not exactly getting in there, but then when the ball comes out of it, you're not there in the right spot for it anyway. So you've kind of just become a negative there, and you're out of position for what if the ball ends up in the opposition hands, and so you're not in the right defensive position. And then that's allowing an overload on our the guys like Zerk, Thatcher, and Asava who were under siege earlier on the weekend. So yeah, and I think he's only 25, 26. He was in the same year, because I think he finished second in the Rising Star above Sam Pepper that year. So he's still relatively young, but he's he it is the last ever since the first. I feel like the first couple of months of last year he was okay, but then as you said, once he started getting positionally thrown around, it seemed to somewhat mess with the vibes. I don't know what it was, but he just I don't. It could be just a symptom of how we try to play and messaging and whatever, because we've certainly seen Darcy Byrne-Jones have struggles in a similar role after an All-Australian year and after having some promise. And it's just
So he's 27.
27, yeah. So he's getting up there. He should be. This is kind of when you start sitting there and say this is footy prime years, next couple of years.
You're a lock. You should be a lock, and you should be setting the example.
Yeah. So one to watch for sure, because I mean he would be in a side at full strength, and depending on positional needs and whatever, he'd be a candidate to be dropped. But most weeks, you'd say he's probably locked into the side. But he does definitely need to up his game for sure.
Whether he's trying to do too much, or he's like overthinking
Hmm.
situations. He needs to find a way to simplify it if that's the case. And
Yeah.
it's
And
a
then,
tired sports term, but just get back to basics.
yeah, then work with the line coaches. If that
On
is an issue,
football.
if that is an issue, then like you need to be a bit more clarify the messaging with your line coaches as well and figure out what's going on there. So, yeah, interesting. There's going to be some interesting watches for the next couple of weeks. Then, not that I have too many worries
Sure.
about mine, but yeah, it's yeah, Burton's definitely an interesting one to watch for the next couple of weeks. Particularly with Showdown coming up because he's famously, uh, injected himself into that discussion with his comments on in radio last year, which I absolutely agree with.
Yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah.
I
I
absolutely agree with.
wonder, yeah, I wonder how we'll go about that, but
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll talk about that next week.
yeah, that'll be a next week thing. All right. So the awards last week. So we had the Jason Bergman Cup in the goal of the week last week. It was interesting. So on Twitter, Bergman's goal won on Twitter, but then on Instagram, it was very much Jason Horne-Francis's goal. So the voting was flipped on both apps. Ended up being Horne-Francis with his winner, obviously getting
Yeah,
59% of the vote. But it was just interesting watching because both of them were very lopsided. Twitter was one way, Instagram was the other, and then ended up being
interesting.
Horne-Francis. Just a slightly more votes on Instagram versus Twitter that got Horne-Francis over the line. Um, and with the Sweeney of the Lockie Jones ragdoll tackle won pretty well with
Yeah, yeah.
84% of the vote. It
Pretty
was,
obvious.
yeah, it was still, I like that there's still a little bit of love for that little handball chain that you brought out, the Rosie and Butters handball chain. Got a
Oh,
bit of love
I
there.
mean,
Yeah.
playing politics are definitely justified to pick a vote. But thanks for anyone else who joined in.
I actually voted, on the goal because I obviously nominated the Horn Francis one because I went second on that last week. But I actually went on there and
Yeah,
from
right.
my personal account voted for your pick. So I tried
Yeah,
to give
yeah,
Berg. Oh, so my vote was for Bergman as well. I absolutely thought
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, there
the
you
people
go.
spoke in Horn Front and that Horn Francis goal will be. I do have an idea for later in the year. I'll bring it up now. I think we might when we get to the end of the year and we bring up however we're going to vote for him, or we might just do like we each get to nominate one that didn't win, and we get thrown into the mix as well.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Because I
A
feel
bit of
like
an
that,
Undertaker moment.
yeah, because I feel like that Bergman one I want in at the end of the year. So, um, but yeah, that's neither here nor there.
Well, there's a
Goal
lot
of
of
the week.
content to come, so we'll see.
Yeah, goal of the week this week. I get to go first on this one.
Sure.
Um, I'm going to go. Considering how bad the game went, there was a few contenders.
Yep.
But I feel like I want to give a little bit of love to Jackson Mead and
come back and impact that aerial contest.
Houston, the recipient of Powell Pepper. He's kicked a goal already in the first term. Called to go. Francis will stay down. Big fly. Georgiades can take a hanger. Falls to the back. Mead snapping. Another one! Mead's on the board. Port have got 6.
the whole move for that goal too, because it started in the defensive 50. I think with Houston, I think it might have the move started with and a quick rebound, kind of slingshot down the field for Mead to snap that one through. And yeah, I
On
think
the
it
left as well.
yeah, I think it ended up being the play of the day or whatever on the Port socials as well. So maybe it's low hanging.
Right.
It generally was my front runner on. So I just thought, it's a different, not that I'm trying to get different players in there. I'm genuinely going to go with what, but I thought that's a real, classy. It's kind of one of those ones that some of the fans on Twitter complain about the players doing the trick shots at training. I was like, that's why they do it because he sized it up and knew exactly what he needs to do. There is skill to that. I know some people
You're
sometimes look
taking
at
shots
it.
from everywhere.
Yeah, you're taking, some people go, oh, it's a snap goal. He's just hooking it around the body. But that there was some genuine art to what he did in that moment. And I thought that was a pretty good one. There's a few options, but I thought I'll give Jackson Mead some love there. And
Sure.
yeah, definitely worthy of a goal of the week nomination, I think.
Yeah, yeah. No, on your meaty. Just on a side note, his place in the side still very interesting.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
that's off the topic. So yeah, I thought it was going to be a Jason Bergman Cup Mark II today. So I've got to decide quickly what I want to go for, but I think I'm going to go for the first one, and that was Bergman's check side goal from 45 metres out, coming out of a stoppage.
Throughout the course of the afternoon.
Out.
From the scramble, Bergman outside of the boot. Miles Bergman sent it for Miles. Hill comes.
Both very similar in essence, but Bergman struck the football a little bit better. So,
and there was a definite bit of just a little bit of behind the curtain of the Wizard of Oz. I have my note and it says goal of the week, and because I wrote it before I actually knew I'd worked out who was going first, I have my two. And I have Jackson Mead snap top, and then my second line says Bergman or JHF. Like I was literally just going to figure it out when we got into the podcast.
Yeah, those are the only three that I have.
Yeah, so same page. There we go. The Bergman one I think was probably what I was going to go with, because he had to really hook it around, like get it onto the check side of the boot, and a little bit more flair to it.
Lateral.
But he kind of running away from the goal almost and hooks it around. Whereas the HORNE-FRANCIS one was really nice because he's just that was that power Jason HORNE-FRANCIS running that we like. Yeah. But the Bergman one was a nice one. It's very. I find it very funny that you were, because if that Jackson Mead snap hadn't happened, then it would have been a Bergman JHF Cup again, I think. I just really wanted to. I just watched the Mead one back again. I was like, give Mead get him in there.
When you take into account the background of it as well, with the build up of play, I think Bergman and HORNE-FRANCIS came out of forward 50 stoppages. So the Mead one was fantastic. And at that time, I could have jumped through the roof.
I was just like,
again,
Jackson
nothing's
Mead's
ever going to go wrong.
Jackson Mead's kicking snaps in this game. Jesus, we're going to win by 10
on the left.
Yeah.
Football.
Tortured pair department. All right. The Sweeney. So you get to go first on this one. This was an interesting one. I did find a couple, but I found one in the game. I found one early, and then I had to watch back to find my second one. But yes, you get to go first on this one. So
so I've got two again. Backman's Union. For me. But I think I'm going to go the Aliir in the first quarter. He dropped off his player and came across to spoil in the 8th minute.
Degoe to Lipinski. Amazing. Not quite my check, though.
Great effort, Aliir.
My check, the meat and the sandwich again.
A big tackle too.
So go back and have a look at it.
Of the first quarter, and while we had a lot of the play, it's just a typical Aliir thing to do. And it was a good passage of play for Collingwood. They came in with a bit of heat, and if he hadn't have dropped off, it would have been a foreshadowing of a goal from the top of the square, or that would have become a consistent theme throughout the game.
It was almost a certain goal,
thankfully.
Yeah. No, it was because Aliir was on Elliott, and he just leaves him, and just because Mychek's going to take a just comfortable mark, and he just flies across and spoils it. So that was top of my list. So that's I thought that might be yours as well, because that one stuck out to me as I watched the game. I just as I was watching that first quarter live, I have it in my live notes. I was just like, Aliir Sweeney, 12:35 left in the first quarter. Is what my note says. So, definitely a good one. That one might be hard to beat. I didn't have another backman one in this one. I went back, and when I was watching again the first half earlier, this interesting one, and this was even earlier in the first quarter. 16. It was only 3.5 minutes into the first quarter, I think. It's in our forward 50. But Frampton goes to kick it clear with kind of a little chip from 20 meters out in the pocket. He's trying to chip over to, I don't even know who he's trying to kick to on probably the forward 50 arc, out their defensive 50 arc, our forward 50 arc.
Dacos brothers combine. Frampton just tries to poke a ball out of defence, doesn't really get much on it. Butters clever inside, and Burne-Jones runs onto it.
Fought hard, turnover again. So this is a fantastic start for them. So there's been a couple of smothers, there's been a couple of intercept marks out here on the half-forward flank. Even Nick Dacos turned the footy over. So pressure in their forward half.
But Jace Burgoyne's kind of involved in the play, and he's running back towards, kind of to try to defend the 50. And Frampton's kick's kind of just a little chip kick, and he's kind of undercooked it a little bit. And Burgoyne's running back, but then he just takes a peek over his shoulder and realizes he's undercooked it and just drops right into the space and takes the mark. And then he quickly, and in the same motion as coming down with the mark, he dishes the handball off to Butters, who then kicks it to Darcy Burne-Jones, who's in pretty good position. He unfortunately misses the kick. I think it's our second point of the day. So it's around that point of the game. Obviously, I'll clip it for the socials and you'll see it. But I just thought it was, and if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be inserted here somewhere. I just thought it was really good. Jace Burgoyne is continuing to be really a really positive spark in the side the last couple of weeks. And that just really showed a moment when I was watching it. I didn't catch it the first time I watched the game live, but watching it back, I went, even watching it back, knowing the result of the game, I had a little moment of Sweeney eyes as I watched it. I was just like, little junior,
particularly for the run of games that he's had. I can completely understand what you mean.
Yeah, it's just that footy smarts, like always keeping yourself in the game. Like even if a kick that he knows that Frampton's taken the kick and he's already thinking, all right, I got to get forward or back towards the defensive side to try and impact the game. But he still takes a peek over his shoulder just to see where the kick is and he just drops off his run, realizing he can take the mark, and because Frampton's undercooked it. So it was just a really cool little one. So I thought that was fun. So it'll be an interesting. I think that our goal of the week and our Sweeney this week are two different styles of goals. And two different styles of plays for the Sweeney. So it'd be really interesting, particularly if you're a loss, like what the vibes are like. Because people may
I know.
Because the votes have been pretty healthy. The votes have been pretty healthy the last
people's spirits.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just watch them in isolation and forget about the result. All right. Really excited and intrigued to get into the votes for the Player of the Year votes, because and I get to go first in this one.
Sure.
So my one vote goes to, I have Miles Bergman in there, and I chopped and changed for a while. And I'm not even sure if I'm okay with Miles Bergman being in there, but I think he's been okay the last few weeks.
I can understand why you would give him a one vote.
Yeah. I think he wasn't. I think in the way the game was going, he still played a decent game. He wasn't a net as true negative to the side, considering how it was going. He was trying to get involved. I think he only had 15 disposals for the game. Again, I've chopped and changed it a little bit.
His first quarter in particular was pretty good.
Yeah, as was for a few. So don't have much more to say, and I had to find someone for the one vote, and Miles ended up in there. There was a few. I almost had Georgiades in there because I thought he was reasonable.
Yeah,
like, that's an honourable mention for me. Maybe he's going to end up in yours. We'll see. Again, we don't talk about this before, so I have no idea. But Georgiades almost ended up in mine. But I thought Bergman. I wanted to give him the vote. I think after the first few weeks, he was a little bit quiet, and I think he came up in the spotlight for you possibly as a watch. I think he's improved. Still want to see a bit more out of him, but I thought, considering the way the game went, I was happy to give him
at one point. Yeah.
Can't
watch.
My two votes goes to Butters. I know he is best on ground for a few, but he had 31 disposals in the end. But the way 15 disposals in the first quarter, and then I think there was some point in the third quarter they brought up that he only had 4 or 5 since at that point, and that was really, we're talking the entire period of the game that the game got lost. He had only had 4 or 5 disposals in that period. Again, he probably picked up 10 or so at the end of the game there in the last quarter, and he had a reasonable impact. But had 6 clangers in the game. There was a few moments he got caught holding the ball. There was one moment he did get caught holding the ball. There was another moment he got caught in the tackle, and I don't think it was holding the ball, but it was just
was that when he bounced it? and he got
Yes.
tackled while he didn't have possession of the ball.
Yeah.
That's a really strange one for me, because I understand that if the player has you already and you bounce it, that's holding the ball. But technically, he didn't have possession. Yeah, I'd really love to see the rule on that one.
It might be
because
like,
I was sitting
because
there, and I
it's,
was like, he doesn't have the ball. Like,
I guess they might just go
technically.
incorrect disposal.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just like
Or fumble.
in semi-pro when he does the alley oop for the first time and the referee just like foul. It's just like, I don't fucking know.
What's that?
Guys can't just jump through the air, Jackie. And that's why I still think he had a good enough game, and it's particularly in this game. Yeah, it's not a whole lot to highlight, but I couldn't give him. There was a few. I know he was the one Port player that got coaches' votes, and I don't know how. He's not best on ground for me. There's a couple. Yeah, obviously we'll get to that, but so my 3 votes goes to, I mentioned it before, but Jace Burgoyne. 21 disposals. He had 4 clearances, which is second best in our team, I think. 81% effective with his disposal. So again, reasonably clean with the ball, and considering the way the game was going, cleanliness was not a strong suit of our game on the weekend. But he's, again, as we were talking about earlier, about guys that just go about their business. Yeah, he was very calm and collected, considering he's a very, very, he's 10 games into his career or whatever he is at this point. Sometimes the sub appearances skew my view of, like, because I think in my mind he's played 8 to 10 games, but he might have a few more with sub appearances. I'm not sure, but
I know it's a bit of a difficult one.
Yeah, but I thought he was pretty good in a game that was, bereft of players being good with the ball. He was one of the ones that were pretty good. 4 votes, Jason HORNE-FRANCIS. You brought him up before as your positive, and yeah, he, again, in a game that was, at times, our midfielders were struggling to get a handle on the ball. He was actually really finding ways to get involved, showing some significant improvement in that aspect from last year, when some games like this would be ones that he'd, sometimes struggle to find his way into. 5 clearances, had his goal. As I said, he's averaging 20 disposals, 10 contested, and a goal a game at the moment, and just seemed to be involved in the game the whole way through. Even though it was going badly, he definitely didn't go missing. And my 5 votes, Dan Houston, 7 tackles, led the team, had 5 inside 50s, which I think was second only to, I think Butters had 6 inside 50s, which is one of Butters' stats. He had 12 rebound 50s as well. So he was involved at both ends of the field and really finding a way to, again, it was a game that was really a struggle to get a handle on, and you couldn't have an impact because obviously it got away from us pretty quickly, but he was just involved the whole way. And a typical Dan Houston game, and hard to find a best of field, I guess, in a game where you lose by 42 points and have a 73 point turnaround. But I'm pretty.
I just got to shudder.
Yeah, but pretty happy to have. And Dan Houston. I just just when I looked at all the stats, I was just like, Dan Houston, I think, and eye test as well. I do look at the stats after the game, but then remember how I felt on the day, and I think I actually
lose by so much. He definitely would have been in coaches' votes.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So yeah, Dan Houston definitely best of field for me. So it'll be interesting to see where yours go now.
Yeah. So my honourable mention was going to be Georgiadis as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like we mentioned in the wrap up, like when you're looking at our forward line without Charlie Dixon, 3 goals to George, 2 to Marshall, 2 to SPP and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like with limited opportunities, he took some great marks in contested positions. And he has been your spotlight recently, I think. And
I did. I think I did give him a positive.
Week, maybe.
Yeah, I did give him a positive rap. Yeah.
But his return from the knee has pretty much summed up everything that you'd probably want out of Mitch, who's playing a bit higher as well. That's been well publicized, but his kicking seems to have returned to him. And so what has he kicked? 2-2 and 3. I think the first game back he kicked 2-2. but he's kicked 2 goals 0 and 3 goals 0, I think,
Yeah,
in the
I
last
know.
2 games. So, honourable mention. I won't sit on him too long. I was going to give him my 1 vote, but then I saw Sam Powell-Pepper sitting there, and again, some of the moments in passages of play, I'm like, you're still a bit rusty. In last year, there was moments where he would see that ground ball, he would run through the pack, taking the ball with him, where a few times he actually overran the ball, and you can just tell it's cobwebs still sitting on him in regards to that aspect of SPP's game, which we, think of him, standing out is kind of splitting packs and whatnot. But when I look at it, he's had 10 disposals as a half forward. 8 of those resulted in scores, 16 pressure acts. And to go along with the 2 goals, he actually had 2 goal assists. So one of those being the first goal of the game. 6 tackles for the game, which, let me just second best on ground. 2 of those inside 50, and he had 5 marks. I thought 1 or 2 of those were contested, but they're not listed as contested marks, so I'm probably thinking of someone else. But when you look at it like that, considering everything that we've said, limited opportunities, much like Georgiades, he still found a way to impact, with a lot of room to improve in the coming weeks. And if he keeps tracking like he has, after a long stint out, the signs are good. So 1 vote for SPP.
Yeah.
Again, a leader of ours.
And definitely a lot better than the first week, his first week back. I definitely agree.
Yeah. My 2 goes to Burgoyne. For all the reasons that you said, 21 disposals, going at 81%. Like, it's just that his composure, I think, is just one of the biggest things that stands out to me, in and around the ball. And, it's brought up an interesting situation where you kind of have to put him on the wing. But now that means that Drew has to occupy more centre bounces. And we're just looking at some of those centre mixes in a game where we were handsomely defeated in centre clearance. You've got Drew, Wines, and Mead sometimes in the middle. And Kane Corns, I think it was on Footy Classified, kind of highlighted it. And I do agree that we need to fix our centre mix. And then the fact that our defense has looked a bit slow, which I think is a bit of a media over-exaggeration, because obviously if the ball's getting hammered in, you tend to look slow as a defense. But, Burgoyne is just that perfect kind of flexible magnet where maybe he could get put back and still play as a high half back and still impact up the ground. Or do you leave him as a wing because he's doing so well? 8 contested possessions, 5 score involvements, tick over 400 meters gained, 18 pressure acts, which top 5 equal 5th, and 4 tackles, 7 marks. So he's just getting involved, like at one of those marks that you brought up before. Like his confidence is coming along really nicely, and it's contributing to. I thought, I said to you off air that I felt that the top 4 players on the ground were pretty obvious. And Burgoyne definitely sits in that pack because, again, when the chips were down, he seemed like one of those players who still wanted to do the right things when presented with the opportunity to do so. Again, another, 19, 20-year-old. So that's a son of a gun. Super happy with him. Lucky that you didn't pick JHF for your spotlight because my backup was Burgoyne, which would have made it 3 weeks in a row. And at that point, you can't really say much more than what we've already said. And,
just be like, I just fucking love you, kid.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a fantastic block of games. Really heartwarming for the father-son academy that we've got going. And yeah, long may it continue, which I think I said last week. 3 votes goes to JHF, 24 disposals, 13 of those contested, 6 score involvements. He was my spotlight. I've already, mentioned him highly, but these are just some statistics. 5 clearances, and all of those were from the center. In a game where we got hammered in center clearance, he put his hand up. 6 inside 50s, 470 meters gained, and 15 pressure acts. So yeah, everything I said before applies here. Now, I think my 4 vote, it's much like our votes for Connor Rosie last week, where I had Rosie low and you had him high. You've got Butters in at 4. I thought it was pretty interesting whether Gary Lyon in the commentary said that for like 8 minutes in the second quarter while we were getting hammered, he was sitting on the bench, and I don't know if that was a symptom of where the ball was for a lot of that time, or
yeah, I don't know exactly, because then his time on ground, because I had a look, because I was like, because I think his time on ground still 84% of the game. I think because I remember. Yeah, you might get it up quicker. I'm trying to flick through my iPad here at the moment, but
Butters, 81%.
81. Okay, so still,
but yeah, so like maybe he really needed, after that such a good first quarter, maybe he was gassed.
Yeah, but then he still spent a fair bit of time
on the bench.
I was worried when Lyon was saying that. I was like, fuck, what's Butters done? Like, that was my worry when he was talking about him.
Yeah.
That long.
But Gary Lyon was kind of giving the impression that he was him and Ken were having a real deep discussion, but it was kind of like, well, fuck, we're getting hammered. Like, get him back on.
Yeah. No, there was,
And I think in the third quarter as well contributed to a lot of that 9% off the ground as well, because then he had 10 disposals in the last quarter. So, yeah, look, 31 disposals, 77 of those efficient, 5 score involvements, 6 inside 50s, 3 rebound 50s. So working back, 570 odd meters gained, 24 pressure acts, which I think is second best on ground, 5 tackles and 5 marks. So much like Rosie last week for us too, I can understand where you're coming from, because the critic would say that in those middle quarters when we really needed him, seemingly dropped off.
But as you said, he spent a bit of time off the ground. But
yeah.
And I definitely know. Yeah, I deliberated swapping him and Jace, but it was just like I guess it is like expectation versus
that
and it's again, like I said in my spotlight, I was just like I love these kids so much, and I say kids, they're young men now. Young men
we set a high bar.
Yeah, and it's because I expect these guys to be the guys that lead us to the promised land, and I know they have it in them. But yeah, he was still in my best. So
absolutely. He still gets votes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I guess. Well, and he was the players' MVP, and like you said, he was the only person in the coaches' votes for Port. So
yeah, it's just how people see the game.
What you find important and what how you see it, like you just said. So my 5 is obvious at this point. It's Dan Houston as well, for all the reasons that you said. I won't go into it any further, but yeah, he's at that high bar which he's set for himself, and he is performing handsomely across his first month and a half. Yeah,
he's playing his role. Long may it continue. I guess that's probably the difference between him and like where you see Butters and Houston is like both of them all Australians last year. But Houston's playing at the level he was, and then Butters and Rosie have just been a little bit up and down the last couple of weeks. Yeah, and that's going to be the next stage of development in their games. Is like now they are the midfield group, whereas up until start of last year, even before. I mean, Rosie came up a little bit sooner, but Butters' role in the midfield really developed last year. So it's like they're still early in their careers in this role. So yeah, we put the spotlight on them because we expect a lot out of them, but we also are very cognizant of the fact they've got a lot, like still very early, like a lot of development to come.
Early in their leadership careers.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's about it. We get to go into preview time now. St Kilda Saints at Adelaide Oval, 7:10 p.m. on Friday night this week. It's Anzac round. So a lot of, I think it's good to highlight just at this moment too. Special round for our club. Our history, the history of the club very entwined with the Anzac spirit and Australian military history. Obviously, I know a couple of years ago, the Rover of Tobruk little 25-minute documentary come out, which has been playing on US TV. So if you're listening from the US, Fox Sports, go on and it's on Fox Sports. I've recorded it and watched it again over here. It's a great little documentary. I think it's on SBS now over in the Australia as well. So give that a watch. That's about Bob Quinn. He's great. Obviously, Magarey medalist and a Port great. But his exploits on the North African front, which was quite fucking brutal in World War II. Battling the Nazi machine and Rommel in North Africa was one of the most brutal and sometimes forgotten fronts of World War II because everyone thinks of either Europe or the Pacific but North Africa was ridiculously brutal. But we had players in World War One, some that didn't come back, so as well as World War Two and Gallipoli, the Western Front, all those different fronts. Port Adelaide does pay a lot of respect and is very entwined with Anzac history. So a good time to remember that and check out that documentary. But as far as the footy goes, 7:10 p.m. on Friday night. So Friday night footy, primetime footy. 19 partly cloudy throughout the day, apparently. Light winds, low of 9 overnight. So should be pretty good conditions at this time of year for footy. It's time to bounce back. St Kilda, Max King is a test at this stage for his knee. I'd expect him to be back because I think they were hoping to get him back last week. So probably expecting him to be back. Dan Butler, who I remember tearing us apart a few years ago when he was, I think that was in that COVID year. I don't
think he's reached the same height since.
No.
It's a Will Hoskin-Elliott type thing.
Well, thankfully he's out for 40. Well, no, I don't say it in the sense of I never want to root for injuries, but he is out for 4 to 6 weeks, which just is purely on the field things. It's at least
he came on as a sub too, didn't he?
He did, yeah. He came on as a sub and then went off with a hamstring towards the end of So he's been battling some injuries. So they've got a few. Hunter Clark, I think, is a test as well. No, he's actually out for a couple of weeks. So they've got a few little injury issues. And they've obviously got issues with how they've been traveling as well. Obviously a bit up and down. Almost pull off a miraculous comeback against GWS, but apparently they torched all their petrol tickets in that comeback attempt because they were completely limp in the I watched the Deadpool Wolverine trailer today, and there's a little bit, if you haven't watched it already, the little bit where Wolverine's trying to get his claws out and they're not quite coming out, and
because he's been drinking.
Deadpool's like whiskey claws, and a condition quite common in Wolverines 40 and over, and I was just like, fucking St Kilda had whiskey footy in against the movie, again. But the dog, St Kilda were pretty bad against the Dogs last week. So somewhat, as we talked about earlier, the AFL is just a really even competition this year because you can almost beat GWS one week and then lose to a team that has probably as much scrutiny on it as any. With Beveridge probably a similar scrutiny to Ken in some respects, at least with fans, and Ken Corns. It's just St Kilda are a bit of an unknown quantity, but I guess I might do my one thing first.
Sure.
The injury management was my big thing coming into this week because we're just talking about St Kilda's injuries, but looking at our side and our balance, and we'll get into some other balance things in a bit once we get to that collective thing, but the injury management, I don't know if many people noticed this, and I can't remember when it was, at what point of the game on the weekend it was, but Zerk Thatcher at some point in the third or fourth quarter, and it was in the kind of the background of like a zoom out shot that the director of the game was doing. You could just see him clutch at his shoulder a little bit. This is 2 weeks in a row now that, Zerk Thatcher's been clutching at his shoulder. So I think he's dealing with something, whether it's one of those things that they can manage through, because players do.
I think
play
he
through.
partially dislocated it last week.
Yeah. And that's like he's managing through that. And
and having done that myself,
we've talked about that. Yeah.
You can just manage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But is it going to hurt?
It straps this week.
Yeah.
It can just be very sensitive, and particularly like the times that I reoffended the same partial dislocation was playing recreational sport in the winter and not warming up properly. But by that stage of the game, because I know exactly the moment you're talking about, because I saw it and I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
But he took a mark later and didn't seem very perturbed by it. So,
I remember that too. Like, he just seemed fine. Yeah.
So, and it didn't get brought up afterwards by anyone.
Yeah.
So whether he's getting injections, because it is just one of those things where
it's quite
partial
famous.
dislocation, you don't need any like structural surgery or anything like that. A rest would be nice, but at the same time, if you're warming up and getting loose and whatnot, it's something that you can really just sometimes you don't even really feel it, but
Well, as you said, that mark he took like later on was like, it seemed like he didn't notice, and it's certainly part of Port law is like Michael Wilson not being able to lift his arms above his shoulders in the finals, but he still made it through. So not that we encouraged like that, but beyond that, we had HORNE-FRANCIS, Lockie Jones, and Bergman all come out of the weekend with question marks, all also looking like they might be good to go this weekend. Nothing serious, but again, the HORNE-FRANCIS is certainly one to watch because he has had a couple of weeks out already with the hamstring complaint, and it was hamstring again, hamstring. But I think Lockie Jones was hamstring as well, which that's what he's had issues. His soft tissue's probably been, and soft tissue injuries with young players is a thing. Like it's just like as you're growing into your bodies and figuring out and understanding how to prepare your body for the rigors of professional sport is a part of the journey. I think Bergman is a rolled ankle is what they said, but they think he's going to be fine. But with Charlie coming back, question marks on him and his fitness, but he's apparently raring to go according to Chad Corns. But it's just being that it was a storyline last year, and now we've got five players I've just named that you could say are all possibly going to play this weekend, but all have at least a question mark on them as well.
Yeah.
I'm already just interested how we're managing injuries going forward. Again, it's AFL, it's footy. All teams, as I've just mentioned, Max King is a test for St Kilda and will probably play this weekend coming off a knee injury. So it's not like it's isolated to us. All teams are doing it.
Carlton played pretty well against GWS with a decent list of injuries too.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Apparently we have depth this year. So
yeah, and I think all five of them will play. It'd be interesting if they do flip the magnets and just take the opportunity, maybe with a. I don't even know who you would. I think if Charlie wants
the drums are kind of beating for Lockie Jones.
That's
of course.
And again, I understand it, even though again, there was even a few comments on the weekend. People were like, "Oh, the people that say Lockie Jones does good things, look at this," and I'm just like, "Well, he does do good things, but
he did do good things within the game, but
yeah,
I don't think he is impacting overall as much as they would probably like for a halfback."
Exactly.
And the obvious replacement for a lot of people is Williams, but if there are question marks on speed, Williams is not a fast runner. He has a very high footy IQ, in my opinion. He takes a great mark and he has great disposal. And last year that looked to kind of bridge that gap between, speed and otherwise. I think, his goal every preseason would be working on fast twitch muscle fibers in his legs, just on a side note for mine, Dylan Williams. But it's the trade-off And do they want to have a look at it? Do they trust that we're actually faster than we appear? It's just the fact that we conceded, 66 inside 50s and pretty damaging inside 50s on Saturday.
66,
which made us look slow.
Which that's just that's not a staple of our game. We're usually pretty good at holding a team to low 50s is what we're aiming for at worst, and then to get into 60s is just not.
Yeah.
Not
and
ever.
If Lockie Jones does have a question mark, then maybe it is a good time to give him a rest.
Particularly if it is a
just to see how it goes.
Yeah, especially hamstring strain, if that's what they're talking about, then that's, you don't want to test that, particularly at his age. You want to manage it and just like train them through that. So yeah, that's my thing for this week, is also like how the balance shapes up, and particularly in game, how they look as well. Because I if Charlie starts hobbling at some point during the game again, I will start. My anxiety will go through the roof, which, being the bottom floor of an apartment building, I fear for my neighbors. Anyway, I'll let you get to yours.
Yeah, so everyone is obviously, I wouldn't say concerned, but interested in how we will bounce back. And there's a large group of people who are of the opinion that, of course, we will bounce back and of course we will win, because there's a perception out there that St Kilda are a middling team. And again, I was on Donny's disposal last night, and I said to him that, like, if we're the team that we think we are, both, fans and in the club, the team that we want to be, and all and sundry in that regard, then we just simply win. But footy isn't simply. We actually have to address some deficiencies that have crept up or been made apparent in the 6 weeks. And while it's a game that we all expect to win, and fundamentally we're a pretty good responding team over the last 4 years, St Kilda do also have to respond for a capitulation of their own. So where they will put their major focus, again, is it going to be Dower like Freo? Are we going to have to grind through that again? If they do try that, did we learn enough from the Fremantle game, where we definitely had a lot to learn from? But with the talent across the ground, I would expect, this is my expectation, that we are a much more professional outfit in comparison to St Kilda, a much more balanced and professional list, that we simply have to win, and I expect us to, and I expect us to win quite handsomely. But it's not just given to you. So, just two clubs coming off of a loss. What are they going to produce is what I'm interested in. How's it going to look on the night? Where we typically get up for an Anzac round game. And we've played a lot against St Kilda as well. But yeah. Yeah.
No, I think it's an interesting, like, even if you look forward to a block of games coming, even beyond St Kilda, it's like a bounce back couple of weeks, really, because the St Kilda games, obviously you want to bounce back and win comfortably, I think, is probably the aim. Obviously no AFL game is a given, it's the old adage that games aren't played on paper. But yeah, it's St Kilda, when you look at where they're at, and they're struggling to find probably an identity and feeling a bit of pressure already, because there was not that there was an expectation they were going to be a top 4 team, but there was an expectation they were going to have an improvement this year, and especially the Ross line. And listening to again, Google it carefully, but Two Guys One Cup podcast, like Charlie, obviously,
Charlie Clausen, his
I mean, that's the whole name from that podcast comes from Two Guys One Cup, because they're two fans of shit teams. He was talking about just not knowing what they talked about, because their teams, Will Anderson being a Bulldogs fan, played against each other last week. So the Two Guys One Cup. And they both of them, like Will was like, I'm not exactly happy with this because I fucking don't know what my team's doing. And Charlie's just like, yeah, St Kilda, I don't know what they are at the moment. So they're in a place of just complete unknown. And while you could say we are, we also kind of know exactly where we are. We're a good team that just can't quite get it done against the good teams. But St Kilda are not one of those good teams at the moment. So we should be coming out and beating them. And for me, I'd be disappointed with anything less than a 5-goal win. That might sound cocky especially after a result that we had last week, but anything like 5 goals, my absolute minimum. That's the response I want to see. If we win, no matter what, I'll just be happy with the 4 points, obviously. But if we have to scrap it out and win by 15 points, or have to have one of those weird games where we have to come from behind at home against a team that
win.
just win. As I always tweet before a game, just fucking win. Like, it doesn't fucking matter. But my attitude towards the win will be dependent on what the level of it is, and I want to see a response this week. Because as we've talked about, beyond, we talked about a lot of disappointments of the game this weekend against Collingwood, but beyond that, we still see some hope in this side, and to build on that hope would be a good win, a good bounce back, as you said, this weekend. That's what I want to see, and especially, obviously, the impending showdown in the week after. Obviously, I want to see some positives
after that. So we need to keep banking wins.
Yeah,
especially at home.
Yeah, the absolute worst we need to come out of the next probably 3 weeks is 2-1. Because you obviously, and that one loss maybe being Geelong, obviously, if we're losing any of the next 2, I'd be a little bit concerned.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, getting to the collective thing, I think we both, you obviously brought up last week you kind of called it when we were doing a review last week, and mentioned that you thought Charlie was probably going to get managed as it is officially known. And Sweet get brought in. An interesting experiment. I think Sweet obviously got a little bit, baptism of fire, so to speak, in his first game as in Port colours. But I wasn't exactly sure of the mix. Like Sweet had 21 hitouts to 19 of Soldo, which obviously that's doesn't match up to ruck attendances. I didn't actually look at the stat for him, but I felt like Soldo didn't actually take enough centre bounces, contests in general.
Particularly when the heat was on.
Yeah, exactly. I think they tried to lean on Sweet too much and give him. But with Charlie looking like he's going to be back this week, I'd expect that Sweet probably just drops back out again, just based on the way the game went. I think he's got a role to play going forward, but just if Charlie's raring to go, as Chad Corns, I think, said on the radio or something this morning, or maybe just the press conference, probably hard to hold Charlie out. Along with that, it's the centre bounce attendances, which I think you alluded to before with Kane Corns talking about it, that I think Kane Corns, who never afraid to go hyperbolic, but usually he's reasonable with to bounce back against people that like to give Kane shit. He's usually pretty well researched in what he's doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a little bit hyperbolic when he said, I think he said, and again, we have been at times as well, because we love this midfield group. Building, but
episode comes to mind for sure.
Is this the best midfielder ever? But yeah, he mentioned, like, if you've got like the likes of Judd Kerr and who was it? Cousins. Jesus Christ! I fucking was talking about Ben Cousins with Donnie when I was on his podcast a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
What was it with? I can't remember. Anyway, but yeah, he was talking about like the fact that they only had 9, I think, centre bounce attendances this weekend, or even across the last couple of weeks. Can't remember. Just like very.
I think it might have been 9 for the season.
9 for the.
It was a very low number for the season.
Yeah,
is how I remember it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I may be wrong too.
Yeah,
but it was a ridiculously low number for the 6 games that we've played as a total.
And that seems to be kind of probably where because at times we look unbeatable, but then at times we look like we can't fucking find a way to win the ball. And so that discrepancy between the best and the worst of what our midfield mix at the stoppage and the particular centre bounce. So the centre clearances were actually not super great with at the moment,
I think
considering
we've only won it twice.
Yeah.
Centre clearances.
which considering the midfield group we have, we should be probably making that a lot more of a contest, if not just
I agree.
dominating it. And again, that's going to be a building thing, particularly with it being such a young group. Obviously, Drew and Wines and Boak, like those guys are kind of on the outer of that, which is incredible to think of Boak and Wines being on the outer of that. And when just a couple of years ago, they were top 5 in the Brownlow between them, with one of them winning it. But that's just how much it's changed. But then it is still, finding that mix at the centre bounce, as well as because the ruck has actually been, Soldo's numbers this year in the league are top, league topping numbers for Soldo.
Yeah.
So
Did you see that graph before we came on?
which one
It
was
had-
that?
I can't remember where I saw it. It would have been on Twitter somewhere, to be honest. But by whatever metric they were using, Soldo is the most effective ruckman in the first 7 rounds, if you want.
Okay.
Call
Yeah,
it
no,
that.
I hadn't. As I said, I was watching a lot of playoff.
Whether it was rating points or like
Mhm.
hit outs to advantage or a group of things to judge ruckman. Yeah, up to this point, he's the most effective ruckman in the league. So that kind of furthers the point where, like, again, like I was all for bringing Sweet in, but in reality, he's Ollie Lord, so to speak. And Ollie Lord wouldn't have started the game in the centre. So I don't know why you would, for someone's first game of the year, for the first game for our club against the reigning premiers, who in retrospect we might have undersold, for want of a better term. But yeah, I would have given Soldo, I don't know, they were going, Soldo's forward craft is better, but we didn't need either of them to be a forward. We just needed a body forward, because George kicked 3, Todd kicked 2, SPP kicked 2. You just needed someone else to
and then
take some heat.
Not that I know much about Sweet's forward craft, but I assume he knows that he can at least make a contest.
He kicked 2 goals against West Adelaide, and albeit it's against an SANFL side, but we didn't need him to.
Yeah,
we didn't need either of them to be a genuine forward like Charlie and like Ollie Lord is. But yeah, I just felt, in particular when the heat was really strong, and Soldo did rotate through there. But as the senior out of the 2, I feel that it would have helped stem a little bit of that pressure.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. He just
the heat was on.
Particularly Soldo's like work around once it gets to ground. Like he's pretty I've found him pretty handy in like just the pressure around the contest as well. Which Sweet just doesn't have
impressed with too. Just second efforts.
Sweet just doesn't quite have the body for that yet, and particularly probably the experience as well. So it's nothing against him.
I have high hopes for Sweet. Like I think, like I mentioned it in our preseason chat about how when we come up against the Crows, so I thought Sweet's tap work was actually better, but Soldo's around the groundwork was better. And since then, Soldo's around the groundwork hasn't skipped a beat, and his tap work has been up there with the best in the league. So I thought we tried something that I was keen to try, and again they can learn from it. We could do it again in a different iteration if need be.
It's more.
I thought that mix let us down.
Yeah, and particularly at the time, as you said, was when the game was starting to get away from us. We needed to. Yeah, you would have probably felt like just a little bit more proactive movement there would have been handy, but maybe it wouldn't. Yeah. Maybe it wouldn't have helped. Again, the game was pretty.
Hinkley knockers, one attribute is he likes to give people a go, particularly young people, particularly people in their early stages at our club. when it works, it's great, but
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
needed a bit more of a feel for the game.
Yeah. But again, it's week.
Josh Harding.
Yeah, who was coaching? Round 6. So yeah, but it is round 6, and we're going into round 7, and I do look at the next block of games because we got just to round out. We'll finish up in the next couple of minutes, but St Kilda this week, Adelaide the week after, then Geelong down at GMHBA, fucking acronym stadium, Hawthorn and Adelaide Oval after Geelong, and then we got North Melbourne down at Blundstone Arena.
So we just got to get through the next 3 weeks.
Yeah,
2-1 be fantastic.
2-1, and then if you look at the next 5, we've got to be looking at it kind of like we looked at the first 5 weeks of this year, and go 4-1 is probably what we need to be at. If we can get through, and
so 2-1 and then 4-1 is what you're saying.
Oh no! So it's 2 and next 5 weeks,
next
like
5.
4 and 1 over the next 5. Yeah. So
absolutely.
win the next 2 against St Kilda and Adelaide, then go down to Geelong and see where we're at. Obviously, we want to see again. That's the next chance at a statement game. Though I will say that the showdown is that needs to be a statement of a different type because we want to go in, but we'll get into that more next week. But yeah, just looking at it, I just had it in a note because a few of the footy shows this week kind of put up the next 5 for Port Adelaide after, with the context of coming after this game. So yeah, a real interesting next few weeks coming up. It's a friendly fixture on paper, but as we kind of touched on earlier in the podcast, it's not one on paper, so we've got to get done.
Sport.
Yeah, St Kilda this weekend, Friday night. Obviously, for the South Australians, if you're a statesider like me, then it's anywhere between 2:30 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. that you're going to be sitting there and watching it. It's 2:30 for me.
Yeah.
East Coast.
Just if I can go back to
ahead.
that ruck topic though, before we finish up. If what is likely to happen and Charlie does come back in for Sweet, how do you think our centre rotation, because I don't want to see Charlie in the centre ruck.
Yeah, well, that's
I don't know, without Ollie Lord, I don't know who could chop out. I mean, I know who, because we've tried a Todd Marshall before. But then Asava has chopped out for Geelong in the past. But they've got Max King if he comes back in, and then was it Cooper Sharman, and I think they've just got a bunch of medium tools around that. So can you sacrifice Asava for a little bit? Because Soldo only needs a chop out. And I don't want to see Charlie in there.
Yeah, in the past, I mean, I remember down at Geelong a few years ago, we used fucking Sampower Pepper in a bunch of contests, and Ollie Wines took a couple of weeks ago. I think that'd be a similar mix. I wouldn't be surprised if Charlie takes 7.
Marshall's no chump.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see what kind of percentage, because Charlie will take some, but as long as it's just forward 50, I just don't want to see
happy for him to take forward.
Don't want to see him take centre bounce ones if we're giving away a few, because
we say we're doing with him, looking after him for the whole year.
Yeah,
that's detrimental to that fact.
Yeah, we probably need to. I think it's going to be more important for our fortunes going forward to find another mix in the centre bounce if it is one of the other guys like a Sava coming up, or I know Lear's taken some at Sydney. I think in the past, I don't think he likes it.
Yeah, I think what was it?
I don't know.
2022, we played Melbourne at Adelaide Oval, and
that shit house.
He got chucked. Yeah, it was a shit game. Yeah, we tried to play a Freo style of game against them, and Lear went in the ruck as well. And while it was just like, huh?
Yeah.
Is that a plan B or a plan C? Yeah.
From what I remember, I don't think he liked it. I think that was one of his things at Sydney is he didn't like getting thrown into the ruck, but whether he'd do it if he needed to. But I just think there needs to be, I think, to put some onus on the coaches, you need to find a mix that doesn't, because they all know that Charlie's health is paramount to, and a lot of his health issues. Obviously, he can get hurt in his forward 50 craft because that's just he's crash and bash a little bit. But he does, when you're leading forward, there's a different pressure that comes on your body when you're taking centre bounce hit outs. And that's clearly been, I think that was clearly a factor in his injuries last year. So
yeah, I mean, we're really only biding time until Ollie Lord comes back, right?
Yeah.
He's 2 to 4 weeks on the club injury list, and surely he will probably come back through the SANFL to get touch like George did. But
yeah, I'd assume he's probably just on track for after the bye. Would be just, I think we just need to get through to the bye, through to the bye, right? Like if he's 2 to 4 weeks,
2 to 4 weeks, yeah.
If he is just
tracking,
it does, yeah. And we sometimes you only find out after the fact. Like Georgiades talked about how he had a few issues with his recovery.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we only find out when he's back playing. He's getting interviewed on the field after. He's like, yeah, I had a few setbacks. It's like, well, fuck, I didn't know. Like, yeah. So who knows? Hopefully, Ollie Lords is all going. I don't think it was a major thing. It was just like it's just one of those things that takes a bit of time. So certainly not like an ACL like George. So yeah, but yeah, in the immediate fact, it does just throw up that interesting question about what we do, because that is the great. Sophie's choice of our team is like,
like, we're biding time until Jeremy Finlayson comes back, and then biding our time
so what we're
at Lord comes back to replace him is probably what everyone is.
Yeah, so Finlayson's going to be due back for Geelong, I think, with my Matt, because last week was his first week. Yeah. So he's not going to be available this week. Not going to be available for Adelaide. So
no. He's back for the showdown, because it was the Essendon game that he did it. I don't know why.
Oh, so
Essendon game he said it. So Freo.
Oh, so he missed Freo. Yeah, I completely missed Freo in there.
And this week will be his third.
So he'd be due back for the showdown. Oh, fun! That's
really only this week that we have to.
That's a Crows home game. That's going to be fun.
That's a welcome that you want. But if they're true to their narrative, then they'll give him a hero's welcome. So Yeah.
Oh god.
Probably get a bit more into that next week.
Can't wait for that preview next week. God, we're already getting kind of into it.
That's going to be a 3-hour
show. You can tell our brains are already ticking forward to that game. Yeah, not that we're overlooking St Kilda. Anyway,
do the job this week, Port Adelaide.
Exactly. Don't overlook anyone. Yeah, just fucking win. All right. I know we need to wrap it up because you have a Parmesan dinner to get to, I think.
Fatherly duties, more importantly.
The fatherly duties.
Pick up my daughter.
And then have her accompany you for a Parmesan. God, I miss a good fucking Aussie schnitzel. Don't get too many of them over here. Anyway, yes, that's about it. We've wrapped it up. We somehow got through what was a very fucking tough game to have to try to look through, but
terrible game.
As usual, it's good to have some therapy with you, so I appreciate it, Jamie. Give us a follow on the social. Yeah, give us a follow on the socials, the Twitters, the Facebooks, the Instagrams. I have started posting the YouTubes. Yes, of course. Thank you for reminding me of the YouTubes. It only takes if you're watching on the YouTubes and my head looks red, it is. Do not adjust your TV sets. I got incredibly sunburnt this weekend at a festival of books down at USC, which was lots of fun. Good vibes down there and lots of people around. But the sun came in. There's this weird thing in LA where like it gets foggy through the first part of the day. It's like they call it the marine layer fog. It's like they call it the May grey and June blue.
Similar to an overcast summer day in Australia. It's very dangerous.
But it just burns off at and it just disappears, just like magic. For like in 15 minutes, it's just gone, and then suddenly you're getting sunburnt. So
sun.
And as you mentioned off air as well, like being a fellow pale skin like me, it only takes 15-20 minutes and you're roasting. So but yes, thank you for watching on the YouTubes and everywhere else that you get in your podcast. Tell your friends, family, all that stuff about us. We appreciate the support. I think that's about it from me. Calm the fucking pair and let's get back on
pair. Let's
get back on track.
Let's do it. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks, Dave.
Cheers, Jamie.